Our family recently switched from using Ambleside Online. We used it for 6 years, really 7 if you count year 0. Then we switched over to the CMEC. So there's some books I really love and I'm just not going to allow my children to miss. So my absolute favorite book from Ambleside Online year 2 is The Little Duke, and this is by Charlotte Mary Young. The Little Duke is about Richard the Fearless, who was William the Conqueror's father. He was the Duke of Normandy, and he became the Duke at a very young age, at 8 years old, after his father was murdered. So the story begins with the treachery of how his father was murdered, and then it follows the boy who moves from being kind of a bratty, spoiled child to his transformation over the course of the book into being noble, how he has to take up the mantle to protect his people, and then how the different men and women work to protect him and his position as Duke, because his position is such an important part of how their society works. And it really shows kind of this coming of age. It gives these beautiful ideas about bravery and nobility, being kind, doing what is right when someone else is doing what is wrong. And, you know, he acts like we would not want our children to act, but they do act. But he has this movement throughout the story where he starts to understand his duty and he takes up the mantle himself. And it is a beautiful story. I prefer to wait on this book till children are older than 2nd grade. I really like it when they're maybe 4th grade because I want them to get more out of the book than reading it to them and they're not ready for it yet. So I have done that where I'll kind of wait. If I kind of have a few kids coming up, I go, okay, well, like with my boys, I just waited till my oldest was a little bit older, and then my youngest was able to enjoy that. I think he was in 2nd grade, but I'd still like him to reread it. It's just such a good book. Another favorite from Ambleside Online year 2 is Our Island Story. And this book takes us through the beginning, the discovery of Britain. There's some mythology there at the beginning, and it goes all the way through Queen Victoria's reign. And what you start to see is that the story of Britain is really the story, the history of America. You start to understand how foundational the story of this little island is to the way that our government works, the way that we think, the way that we speak. The fact that we use English as our language is entirely connected to Britain. And it also gives a beautiful heritage. It traces some of the Christian heritage of some of the kings and queens, and how it gives a noble look at those things. It also talks about some of the kings that were not faithful, some of the men and women who did things that were wrong, and then you're able to talk through those things with your students. I think citizenship is another kind of way to look at this book, and I love giving this to my kids to read when they're a little bit older, or to read aloud to them when they are younger. Because it gives us their short little chapters, and it gives a full narrative. And often I will see my kids playing at the stories that they read in here. Another great book not to miss from Ambleside Online year 2, which is focused on the Middle Ages a little bit, is Joan of Arc. This is a beautiful retelling of Joan of Arc's story. It's a short picture biography of her story. It's a great introduction to Joan of Arc and her story. It does a really nice job of giving some of the spiritual elements that are a little unusual. but then it allows for interpretation since we don't really know what happened there. But yeah, it's a great story. And finally, we come to Wind in the Willows. And this version of Wind in the Willows is actually abridged, but I really recommend having this version that's illustrated by Inga Moore. And I will link to an illustrated version of Wind in the Willows that is not abridged, so you could be reading the other one while your children are looking at this beautiful copy. What I love about Wind in the Willows is the friendship between rat and mole. It really gives a beautiful picture of how to be a good friend and how to celebrate with someone, or even how to help a friend. We have such a soft place in our hearts for the Wind in the Willows characters and story, and we would not miss this book. So I always make sure to include it for my younger ones reading. So that's all I have for today for the Ambleside Online Year 2 books. You can check out my Ambleside Online Year 1 video because a lot of the books from Year 2 actually continue from Year 1. So you can see which ones I'm not going to miss there as well. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.